The Greater Montana Foundation benefits the people of Montana by encouraging communication, with an emphasis on electronic media, on issues, trends, and values of importance to present and future generations of Montanans.
The people of Montana should care about art in Montana because art in Montana cares about them.
When I think of art, I think of the world that opened up to me when I was a kid.
Well, when John and I were in school, our biggest dream of success in the art world was that we would get a job teaching at the university.
Montanans are incredibly individual thinkers. You know, you find few Montanans who want to be told what to do. Thank you very much.
They treat artists like family members.
I mean, I get so many good ideas from people who think they don't know anything about art.
What really draws artists here are the other artists who are already here, and that's always been the case.
Oftentimes museums, they can be perceived as these places that are very protective and isolated and elitist. And in Montana, it's just the opposite.
You know, I tell them to turn off the TV and come to the museum. We don't have people come into this museum who don't love it.
In a museum, you come to find the thing, the one authentic thing that doesn't exist anywhere else.
I mean, if you have guests coming to town, where do you take them? You take them to your art museum.
There are a couple of things you have to kind of watch out for when you come to Montana. He said you have to watch out for grizzly bears, and you have to watch out for art openings.
What you're about to see is an examination of art in Montana, and more importantly, the artists who produce it and the museums who bring it to the people. You'll recognize the names of some of the artists. Other names will be less familiar. Each has chosen to live and work here in Montana for the same reasons you and I have. I'm John Bollinger. Please join me in discovering the treasures hidden in a very special place we call Behind the Vault Door.
Montana is rich with contemplation. When you go out into Mother Nature here, take a great hike, go to your fishing hole, you take a walk, there's a lot of time to think. And I think that lends itself to the creative process. And I think that's a large measure of why creative people are drawn to a place like this.
A lot of people come to Montana and they say that that people are much more friendly here. And I think that's true. And I think that the fact that we aren't maybe so busy with our lives that we take time to enjoy one another and we're not so competitive. And I know some of those are individual things, but I do feel like the spirit of Montana in general is one of friendliness.
Well, I've often wondered why Montana art flourishes. Maybe it's the long distances that make people want to see each other in the winter when we're all locked up in the snow. Or maybe it's the quietness in the winter that keeps you working on your own stuff so you're not at each other's throats like they are in New York, always fighting with each other.
Yes, art's about commerce, but it's more about our spirit, more about our spirituality. There is no way we can live without art. We'd be empty inside. Montanans generally understand that, but oftentimes are working so damn hard they don't have a way to appreciate that, or it doesn't sink into them.
The great Montana modernists came to the state to teach at these institutions, and that's how we got and kept, some of our best artists, because they had jobs as professors, and it was viable for them to stay in Montana and make a living here.
There was a job teaching sculpture at the art department at the university here, Bozeman. And I applied for the job, got on an airplane and flew out, and I'd never been to Montana. And honest to God, I didn't really know where it was. But I was lucky enough to be brought in because of my teaching to be able to live here. And I've since ceased to teach now, But, you know, I never found a reason to leave.
When John and I decided to stay here, we knew that we would be sacrificing a lot in terms of our careers. But as soon as I drive into the border of Montana, I feel this weight lift off my head. I believe there's a freedom here of being who you are. People are just allowed space here. It isn't just physical space, it's emotional space.
I also love the quality of light here. There's a certain edge to it. There's a real crisp, almost hardness to the light. And because my work involves a sense of space and depth, I feel very attuned to the light quality in the state.
People basically, I feel, came and settled Montana because of its aesthetic appeal. So I think there was kind of that artistic attitude and appreciation from the people that moved and settled the state.
I think Montana and the West in general, the artists here are less competitive than perhaps on the East Coast.
I think that the smallness of the population allows for an intimacy in conversation and relationships that's maybe more difficult in a higher population area. And I think that for the most part, we're all smart enough to know to cherish that.
I don't know of any artists who move to Montana to sell their work here. They move here because there's something about their spirit, something about their personality, where they want to live in a state like this, with its freedom and with its space, and in conjunction with like-minded artists who've also moved here for those reasons. So you give a few things up, but you get a lot of things in return.
I think I've always felt like there weren't a lot of sacrifices being an artist in Montana. I think my own experience of feeling like I'm an artist in Montana has felt more like a privilege than a sacrifice.
But for an artist, this is not a place where there are a lot of connections, a lot of venues for your exhibitions, for, you know, getting your work shown. At least not if you wanted to compare it to a big city or, you know, what you typically think of as an art center. We don't have a great, huge wealth of donors to create a metropolitan museum of art for Montana, but we sure have a lot of artists, and we have a lot of little art centers, people having shows.
The natural environment has a huge draw here, I believe, and also the pace, but the money is tight. It's the financial situation is challenging for artists here.
But you really want to have the highest quality, the highest, or maybe the most stimulating or inspiring. And to maintain that, I think, is going to be a challenge for the state of Montana, because we really need people to support those museums. And, you know, if we don't have the people to support them, both on a financial level as well as just kind of in spirit, then, you know, then they're going to disappear.
And with those faithful donors, we have built this amazing collection. Sometimes it's too hidden. It's a hidden treasure. It's a repository of some amazing things.
I think, first of all, one of the things about being a Montana artist is that we do face the same obstacles as artists everywhere, but we also have the privilege of just about knowing everybody that's an artist in the state. Because the community is so small here, we tend to run in the same crowds, cross the same paths, so we get to know each other. And the relationships become very long-term.
And I think what they suffer from here is a lack of appreciation and awareness on the part of the general population, that most of them who do make their livings professionally as artists, rather than being artists in addition to having other jobs, they do so by selling their work to those who appreciate it outside the state. And to me, this seems very unfortunate that they have to go somewhere else to be appreciated for the achievements that they accomplish here on this ground, and often inspired by this land and this place.
I think that children need to be exposed to art from a very early age.
We have 17,000 contacts with children in this area every year. We're from a town of 100,000 people. Now, you do the math.
They have no problem with abstraction. They get it right away. And that's one of my missions, is to get kids excited about what they can make and learn, and not feel worried or inhibited about creating.
And when the adult sees their children thinking and analyzing, making choices and giving opinions, I've never not seen them amazed. They're standing back and they're going, whoa, you know, that's the same kid? I can't believe that's the same kid.
The ultimate purpose of the arts is really to continue to exercise a child's creative spirit. You know, we're all born with it. It's innate. Every human being has it. If you look at little kids, I mean, kindergarten kid with a chunk of clay or in front of a palette with paint, man, you can't stop them. They just go nuts.
I think you get to know how important museums are when you are standing in the museum, seeing people come in for the first time and get that initial jolt of electricity that comes with being touched by a work of art.
I think it is important for a lot of the different cities in Montana to be aware of what's happening elsewhere. You know, I think the museums, the different arts organizations in each town can only do so much, and I think, you know, the great thing about Montana is that it is a very tight community statewide.
I would tell somebody who's never been in an art museum, you know, you could walk into that museum and see work done by your neighbor, by somebody who lives down the road from you. I mean, there are artists all over the state, some of whom only make art, some of whom are ranchers, who are teachers, who have all kinds of jobs and make art that winds up in our museums. And a lot of people would be surprised at how much they would see that would speak to them of their own experience.
I think there's a critical relationship between the artists here in Montana now and the museums. Again, we are their home in a perfect circumstance. We are the place where they can come and be reviewed, sometimes be criticized, but certainly be appreciated in one manner or another. All art is not for all persons, and it's a fascinating experiment to see what artists offer in their individual ways and see how they become interpreted by each and every person.
You know, it's a richness that gathers with a collection, and there's a pride, a local pride, that is a very important aspect of it. Montana's not frozen in time. Missoula's not frozen in time. There's so many stories to tell. There's so many trails to follow, to look at in terms of our human experience, and that's what contemporary artists do.
Montana's really rich culturally. You know, it's from so many different ways of looking at it. I think it's very important to have in this state collections of art by artists who are working in this state. It is the record of our culture at this particular time.
Museums are the storehouse, the treasure house of all the material cultural best. So in a sense, it's the vault, the community vault, but it's one you can come into any time. You can take advantage of those things that your forebears and your neighbors have decided really, really matter.
There's great stories about contemporary art in Montana.
In the last 50 years, or maybe 60 years, we've been, I think, more open to contemporary art.
Well, you know, the contemporary arts have always been a little contentious everywhere in the country. And here in Montana, too, where the tradition really is Western art, Western scenes, landscapes.
The whole idea of the West was a spiritual goal for the whole country, to move west, to change. And then, of course, Charlie Russell and Remington, those guys who documented the way of life of the normal people. I mean, this was it was a pretty radical thing to do art about just driving cows.
The design that you see in Indian art is abstract art. It has been abstracted from a particular point of view. And so we kind of come full circle when we look at historical art and we look at contemporary art.
Contemporary art, it's different. It's different here than in more competitive environments. I think that in some ways, if there was lots of galleries here and people were coming in and there was a real commercial competitive nature about that, then people might be stepping on one another for success. But success to a Montana artist is something else.
So it's not just contemporary art that I think people might struggle with to understand what's the symbolism or what is the artist trying to convey. I think trusting one's own instincts is the key to that.
We're also contemporary thinkers. We couldn't live the lives we lived if we didn't honor the time we lived in. And I keep telling people, in 100 years, the contemporary art they see in our museum today is going to be historical art.
For ceramics, Montana is a mecca. All the time I was at Archie Bray Foundation, I felt like we had just a tremendous community of artists working there.
One of the most incredible experiences for me was working in the old pottery at the Bray, where literally you would get a sense from the bricks and mortar that Pete and Rudy helped lay with Archie Bray, that history was oozing out of the bricks.
You know, back in 1951 when Archie Bray had this vision with Peter Malloy and Branson Stevenson, it was the first ceramic-specific residency program that was available in the U.S.
And then Archie Bray, this benevolent arts supporter in Helena, who owned and ran a brickyard, giving Pete Volkas and Rudy Audio an opportunity to come over during the summers and work in the brick factory, make a little money, and make some artwork. The seeds were planted.
When I got to the Bray and saw it for the first time, I thought, that's the Archie Bray? It's a dump. You know, the place it's a mess. I imagined it was Oz or something in my mind.
You know, I'd heard so much about the Archie Bray Foundation, and it was this, you know, kind of the pinnacle of ceramic residency programs. And I'd driven out here from Chicago, and I think the first time I drove in, I just thought, this is the Archie Bray Foundation? Because there was artwork all over the grounds, and the buildings looked a lot older than I kind of imagined. You know, back when Volkas and Audio were here, there just weren't any opportunities to go and work. But to just have a studio where you could be supported and work on your artwork was a very rare thing.
I mean, it really just went off the charts in terms of tracing the development of contemporary American ceramics and putting it in the context of contemporary American art in general. And in Montana, I mean, the Bray and Helena became kind of a hotbed.
I think it's probably because it has a great reputation, number one. And number two, if you're accepted there, you're free to do what you want. Nobody tells you what to do.
Sometimes we'll get some residents from within Montana, but usually they're coming from all over the country and in a number of cases from around the world. You know, for example, within the last 2.5 years that I've been here, we've had artists from New Zealand, from Ireland, from Singapore, from Japan, from Korea.
I think the Archie Bray is recognized now as probably the most important thing in Helena, besides it being the capital of the state. People come there from all over to work there and to look the place over to try to emulate it maybe in other countries. And of course the students who come here from other countries carry back that desire to try to reestablish something like it somewhere else.
I think the most important thing that I think of when I think of the Bray is the community that's attached to it. And it affects people in a really deep way. And I think people are proud of that. I think they really like the fact that that exists here in their backyard.
I've always balked at the notion that other artists are my competition. Again, it speaks to that neighborliness that I think is native to our culture in Montana.
And you'd have an opening at the Yellowstone Arts Center, and these people would show up from all over the state. I couldn't believe it. People would drive like 150, 200, some of them 300 miles to go to an opening. That is the kind of support that doesn't come in any big city.
I've lived with this experience all my life of people coming together to support one another around the work that they do and to celebrate the work that individuals make.
We've had a lot of world-class artists move out to Montana and now live down the street. You know, and I think they noticed the same thing because they knew that it would be good for their artwork, it would be good for their well-being just in general.
This is the place that nurtures me and nurtures my work, and this is the location of my community. You know, my neighbors, the people who I've chosen to live among and make cups for.
When you get an invitation to drive to an opening in Billings or Bozeman or Great Falls or Butte or Missoula, I mean, you don't even think about it. You get in your car, you make plans, you go over there and you celebrate that particular artist's work with that community.
It is part of the essence of Montana, I think, that has fostered that kind of community in Montana.
You know, and even just, you know, like a Josh Deweese mug. I drink tea out of this mug every day, all day. It's a habit, it's a friend. You know, Josh is a friend. He made this, I'm using it. That's a wonderful connection. It's a handmade object, and it continues to be meaningful in my life.
Being an artist is not just a job for most of the people who pursue it. It's something that they do in spite of the obstacles. It's something that they do even if the work doesn't sell, even if the critics don't like them, they still keep doing it, and that kind of determination is really worthy of respect.
All Montanans, I think, need to look at these public benefit institutions very much like our natural resources. And if they would see these institutions as our best and finest natural resources, I think would be a huge step.
There's a big difference between making money and making soul. And I think that in the world of art, the process of making soul has, you know, greater value than anything that might be about making money.
I think there's something about this space, its grandeur, the way it humbles us, the way it also invites us to be a part of that grandeur, that, yeah, it's part of the magic of art here. Space. It's a big invitation.
And I would challenge you to look across this country at almost any little town. If you've been to Ringling, Montana, yeah, you know, any place you go, there are people who are saving what is important to them. And that's what museums are. And they don't belong to the people who run them. They belong to the communities that surround them. So I think they're as important as the water they drink.
more information about Montana's art community, please visit our website at www.behindthevaultdoor.com. The Greater Montana Foundation benefits the people of Montana by encouraging communication with an emphasis on electronic media, on issues, trends, and values of importance to present and future generations of Montanans.